Hello, listeners. Welcome to Sailing the East podcast. I'm Bela and Mike. My co-host, Mike Wasserman, is not available today, so I'm going to be doing this one solo. This is our podcast about sailing the east coast of the United States. In some episodes, we will focus on passages and destinations. In other episodes, we will talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting person, we'll try to get them to be a guest on the show. Well, we came across a very interesting person. His name is Sam Holmes. You may have seen his YouTube channel, where he shares his adventures with the rest of the world. He has sailed solo to Hawaii. He has also sailed up the east coast of the United States, from the Gulf Coast all the way up to Maine, and then back down to North Carolina. He's a real adventurer, and he does most of his sailing solo. So it's a great, interesting story, and he and I had a great interview. Let's get to it right away. Today I'm with Sam Holmes, who is an accomplished sailor, an adventurer, I would say, and a YouTube star. So welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, certainly. So tell me a little bit about sort of how you got started in sailing.
I learned how to sail when I was a kid on 420 dinghies at a sailing camp.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned how to sail. And then I didn't really sail much until I was an adult, or I didn't sail any until I was an adult. And then I just bought a boat on Craigslist, and I started kind of relearning. And that's how I got into sailing.
Yeah. And if I look at, I've watched a bunch of your videos. I won't say all of them, but a pretty large portion of them. And you've done some pretty long trips. I think you did a trip from LA to Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yeah, I sailed a 23-foot boat from LA to Hawaii, and then all the Hawaiian Islands, and then I sold that boat. And I got a boat in Florida, and I sailed that up to Maine, and then back down to North Carolina.
Yeah.
So I'm preparing to cross the Atlantic next.
That's your next adventure, going across the Atlantic?
Yep.
Very nice. And so let's go back a little bit, if you would, to when you were younger. And you said you did some sailing as a kid. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in North Carolina, in Wake Forest.
Oh, okay. And did you sort of start off life as saying, hey, I want to be a sailor, or did you have various different jobs? What were some of the things that you did?
I used to work at Disney, and then I quit that job to go to do sailing.
Oh, what'd you do at Disney?
I worked on projection for the rides.
Oh, wow.
At the parks.
So do you have like a technical background or an artist background or creative arts or something?
Yeah, like industrial design. So I studied.
Oh, okay. And so what sort of inspired you to quit Disney, quit probably a reasonable paying job, sail just on the weekends, if you will, to quitting all that and getting sort of jumping headfirst into sailing?
I wanted to sail to Hawaii, and I was kind of tired of my job, and had some medical stuff that made me kind of try to change my priorities a little bit. So it seemed like a good time to go ahead and do that. Yeah.
And how old were you when you sailed to Hawaii, Sam?
29, 30. I think I was 30.
Okay, 30. And you did that solo, is that correct?
Yeah. It was a small boat, so I wouldn't want to be in that small space with another person really for that long. So better to do it solo, I thought.
Yeah. Now,
plus I didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't want to get someone else killed.
Right. Well, it's one of these. You're always learning when you're doing sailing. That's for sure. There's always something that you're going to experience that you haven't experienced before, and you sort of have to figure it out. And I've always thought that was one of the interesting things about it.
Yeah, for sure. You'll always learn something new out there.
Yeah. So this podcast focuses predominantly on sailing on the East Coast of the United States. And so the reason I reached out to you was I think this past year, You started down in Key West, if I remember correctly, and sailed pretty much up the east coast of the United States, all the way up to Maine, and then turned around and went back down to North Carolina. So,
Yeah, I started in Punta Gorda, I guess. Yeah, so like on the Gulf, and then I went around to the Keys. Yep,
yeah,
and that's about right.
yeah. And did you do that solo as well, Sam?
I picked up a girl in Florida, and then she sailed around the Keys with me, and then she did the leg from like the passages from North Carolina to Maine, and then the rest of it I did solo.
Oh, okay, okay, very nice. And so, what sort of drives you to do things solo? I mean, that's sort of a different way of sailing, right? I've done it a few times, but certainly not. It's not my normal way of sailing. And what
Hmm.
sort of drives you to do that?
I guess I kind of like when I first got my boat, it was kind of hard to get people to go, with me because I wanted to sail like every weekend, kind of.
Yeah,
So sometimes like I had to have a girlfriend to go with, but not always. And so I just was like itching to always go right whenever I wanted to. So I pretty early, I think like the first time I took my boat out, I was single handed just because I was fine with that. Even when I learned how to sail, like at the sailing camp, like when I was like 15 or something, like none of the other kids, like me and my brother were like really into it, but none of the other kids were like really wanted to be there, I guess. So
yeah,
we just kind of would single hand the boats with the other kid just kind of like along for the ride, I guess.
yeah,
And so I just thought like, I mean, I guess that made it like something that wasn't really that, that was something that was doable. I guess sometimes people are intimidated by single handing.
yeah,
So pretty quickly I figured out I could do it single handed. And then I also realized most of the time when I did bring people, it almost was harder because you're kind of like trying to give them a job and also kind of give them guidance for what they need to do. And then sometimes you got to kind of take over a little bit. And so you're kind of working around more people.
yeah,
So I kind of like started to realize it's kind of a plus to go solo. And then also when I would do longer trips, it's even harder to find someone, to do like a 3 or 4 day weekend. I can take off work. Or kind of sometimes it's like indefinite when you're going to get back. And like the longer stuff is definitely easier to go. It was easier to get people to, or easier to just go solo than try to find someone who's a good match. And also it's kind of hard to get along with people in those situations. Like for even, just even like a long weekend. So I like that part about solo. And then like once I started going further, I started to really appreciate being alone out there. Like, this feeling of like you're just like a little speck out there on the water in your small boat, and this kind of self-reliance. And then also I like the aspect that like you're in charge of everything and only responsible for yourself at the same time. And I think that's was one of the things I like a lot about soloing, especially like the ocean passages. And then the more I do it, it's like the more I like it. Like this feeling of accomplishment of like doing it yourself is pretty cool. So that's kind of what has kind of draws me towards solo sailing.
yeah, yeah. I can hear that excitement in your voice for sure, and that enthusiasm. And from my perspective, there's sort of like a difference between going out for a day sail solo and doing
Hmm.
a 3 or 4 day passage solo. And I understand the challenges of finding crew, right? Those are always if you don't have a
Hmm.
partner that sort of wants to do it with you, then that's always a challenge. But it's sort of I find it a bit intimidating to think about doing a 2 or 3 day passage solo and worrying about sleep and sleep deprivation and all the crazy things you read that can happen when you're sleep deprived. And when you're
Yeah,
sailing
that's.
relatively close to shore,
Hmm.
there's a lot of traffic. It's not like you're out, 400 miles offshore where if you take a half hour nap, chances are you're not going to hit anything. But when you're more doing coastal things, it's a little more challenging. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. That's the biggest thing to get over is to have the boat, steer itself right and stay awake at the right times and kind of deal with being tired. That's really hard for me. I don't, function well without a lot of sleep. But you just have to do it. And once you're on your boat, like if you don't have another option, then I'll like make myself stay up. And I kind of also alter the way. I think it's maybe on the East Coast there seems to be a little bit more traffic because all the ports I've been going to. I guess like going to Catalina, there's kind of a lot of boats going back and forth on the West Coast. But I would kind of alter the way I sail. Like a lot of people like to sail through the ICW or near shore. But like I really preferred, especially solo, it makes sense. Like I'd prefer just to go way as far offshore, as I can reasonably go. Like I can just do like a big tack out and then come back, just to get myself as far away from shore. Because then I'll see less boats and there'll be bigger ships usually, and they might have AIS now. They have AIS, I can see them. And then also I would do the same thing in Hawaii. Like I would usually like leave it. Not quite as much traffic around there if you go further out too. So like instead of just going straight from island to island, or like we're kind of tacking along the coast, I would just just do one big tack and get like as far away as I can. And sometimes it would make it take a little longer, but then I could maybe get some intervals of sleep out there that I would feel a little more comfortable with, that I wouldn't feel comfortable closer to shore. Yeah. So, and then other things like I would do like sometimes. If I know I'm going to have to sail overnight for a lot of passages too, and I'm trying to time it so I get there during the day. Sometimes I do this thing where like if it's a downwind leg and I can have the boat and I want to get there too soon, I'll just like heave to and kind of set it up so I kind of make the leeway, kind of drift into the area I'm trying to go. And that way the boat's not, moving too fast. It's pretty nice, comfortable to kind of rest. And then I'll have to just kind of poke my head up every once in a while, make sure that someone else isn't going to hit me because I'm just kind of, drifting. Yeah. But those are kind of the strategies that I've found work for me. But again, I just kind of learned them as I went. Yeah.
Well, I certainly can identify with the sleep deprivation part, because the long passages I've made have typically been with either two other crew members or just one other crew member. And certainly when I've done, 3 or 4 night passages with one other crew member. And for me, I don't get enough sleep with just one other person there, doing 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Man, I found that to be really challenging.
No, for sure. Even after I sailed to Hawaii, I'd never really done like the crew watch kind of thing, because like all my overnight stuff was always solo. Then I started sailing with a girl in Hawaii on her boat. We went from Oahu to Kauai, and she was also kind of a solo sailor. She had sailed to Hawaii solo on her boat. She had a little bit more experience, doing kind of some crude washes and stuff. But we were both at that point, we were kind of solo sailors. And we started trying to do the sleep schedule, but like I just couldn't do it instinctually. I couldn't like sleep for the full time. I have to, when I'm on a boat, I just have to wake up and look around every 10, 15 minutes. I couldn't like, what happens is like, I just get in this routine and I go to sleep, and then like I just wake up and my heart was like kind of pounding until I see that nothing is around, and then I can go right back to sleep again. And I would forget that she was there on watch, and I didn't need to go up. And then when I was on, and I just hated trying to stay up for the full watch, because I just wasn't used to that. And then we ended up just, what worked for us was we just kind of sailed like we were solo sailing, and we just had kind of 2 people doing the kind of sleeping and then, looking up every few minutes or so. Yeah. So I haven't really done much sailing with a crew, so that's different for me.
Yeah. It's amazing how sort of flexible the body is and how it can accommodate various different situations, right? When you're by yourself, somehow your body knows, hey, I got to wake up every 20 minutes or half hour and poke my head out. And, it really is remarkable.
And you kind of need that something to force you to do it, right? Like if I was trying to do that, not for some other reason, that wasn't like, crucial that I wake up, I couldn't stay up.
Exactly. Right. If you're trying to do that when you're at, on land in your house,
it's like to check something at work or something. I don't know. Like if there was something for that, I couldn't do it, but out in water I can.
Yeah. What do you think is the most challenging part of sailing solo?
The most challenging part of sailing solo, what would be? I mean, yeah, the kind of keeping a good watch probably.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Now, I find that one of the interesting, and the only place I've ever sailed is on the East Coast, from Nova Scotia down to Florida. And one of the things that I think is remarkable about the East Coast is this notion that you could sail the whole length of the East Coast from Key West up to Nova Scotia, and you can do it in 4 to 6 hour chunks or 4 to 8 hour chunks. You don't have to do overnight passages, right? There's a couple places where it's a little, depending upon your boat, it might be a little sketchy, but you can pretty much do the whole thing with not having to do overnight passages. You could do short hops and anchor out, or lots of bays, et cetera, along the way. And so what sort of, was it a schedule that sort of drove you to do this in longer legs, or is it just that that's what you enjoy?
It's what I enjoy. I don't know. A lot of people kind of had suggested I go through the Chesapeake. It would be really beautiful and stuff. But like it's kind of a multiple things. It's, for one, it's like I enjoy the longer stretches. Also, I was trying to get up to Maine while it was still summer and warm, so I could like enjoy it more when I got there. And then the solo sailing, it kind of it works a little better when you're offshore. I think, like in the Chesapeake, I had a lot of trouble. I would have to stop and anchor. I can't have trouble going that slow, I guess, like where I have to stop that often. I'm just used to going, I don't know, what to make more progress. Yeah. So I was, kind of time crunch, and then going offshore let me kind of just kind of not be able to relax the watch a little bit more.
Yeah. I do agree that being offshore is much more relaxing. Right.
I can get more wind. Yeah, and also I don't like going in between the buoys all the time.
That's right.
Staying in the channel. It's such a narrow, and like you have to be right on it. Like it's so easy to go around in so much of that stuff. I can relax when I'm further out. I just have to pay a little bit of attention to the weather. But the boat I have now is so much better for that kind of stuff than the Ranger. Like I had some kind of bad weather in the Gulf Stream once, and I just hove to, and it went from like really kind of scary, but to not too bad, just hove to and drifted overnight. And then the waves period kind of spaced out a little bit, and then it just kept on going. Yeah.
Yeah. So what type of boat do you have now, Sam?
I have a Cape Dory 28 now.
Oh, very nice. One of the first sails I ever took out in an ocean was on a friend's Cape Dory 30.
Oh, cool.
Very, very stout boats. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. I know what you mean. It seems like when you're close to shore, you got to be watching stuff, because there's crab pots or lobster pots or fishing nets or other boats, and you're always I'm always a little bit on edge, I'll call it. It's hard for me to totally relax. Whereas if I'm 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 miles offshore, there's nothing out there. And
right, nothing to hit.
There's nothing to hit. There's nobody popping up on AIS or radar. You can't see anybody, and you can really.
I did hit a log out there once. Just a big log.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest sound.
Yeah.
I like the Cape Dory, the full keel, because it kind of just roll, like crab pots and stuff just kind of roll off the bottom.
Yes, that's very nice for that. It's very nice. So you've sailed on the West Coast. You've sailed in Hawaii. You've sailed in the Gulf a little bit, up the East Coast. What are some of the things that you find are really nice about sailing on the East Coast?
Nice about sailing on the East Coast. Well, there's lots of places to go in. You have lots of options. If you want to go a little further, you can probably make it to another port. Yeah. You're making good time.
Yeah.
Or if you can just kind of go towards land, and you don't have to divert so far to the Vegas. But I don't think it's as much as that on the West Coast.
Yeah. I guess one of the things that I find comforting about sailing in the East Coast is this notion that even if you're 20, 30, 40 miles offshore, if something bad happens or the weather unexpectedly changes on you, you can get into a port pretty quick. I mean, there's ports almost every 10, 15 miles, it seems like. You can get into something, right? If you need to.
And I would always kind of pick one which I was kind of aim for, but then I usually wouldn't end up in that, then have like a kind of a short or a further one. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. When I do my passage planning, I always have sort of bailout points along the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay,
also, it seems like the winds, they're not like, it's kind of a good and a bad thing, but the prevailing winds, they kind of switch, so you could go up or down. You know what I mean? Like I felt like on the West Coast, the wind is kind of was always it's like rare for it to change. But I would get more of a variety of forecasts. It seemed like I don't really understand, like I don't know how the pressure systems really regulate the weather over here on the East Coast. I still haven't really quite grasped it yet. But that's I think this passage across the Atlantic is going to be, I don't know, more difficult in that regard than the sailing to Hawaii. Because in Hawaii, just kind of got in the trade winds, and sure they went from side to side, and eventually sometimes I was beating into the wind, but it was kind of like I just knew that the high pressure system would kind of like regulate the trade winds kind of, and just kind of go down south a little bit and then hook over.
Yes.
But there seems like there's so many more like things at play over in this section of the Atlantic. Don't quite get it yet, but I'll keep studying it. Hopefully I figure it out before I leave.
Yeah. So what's your plan? When are you going to depart to go across the Atlantic?
Well, I got my boat in my front yard. I got a little workshop in North Carolina, and I'm just, the boat was kind of good enough to go before, but I just kind of like shore it up a little bit. I put new chain plates on it, and I took off the deck, the tow rail, and I see like all these leaks water's been getting in the hull deck joint. So I'm doing some glass over on that. So I want to get the boat back in the water though in like April, and then try to leave towards the end of May. That seems to be what the books say to do.
Yeah, and what route are you thinking of taking?
Well, my first plan was going to go up, the coast and like leave from like Newfoundland, but since I've already gone up to Maine and I wasn't able to get into Canada last year, I think this time my goal will be I've changed it to go to Bermuda and then the Azores. And then I was kind of want to do like more north, like to like Ireland instead of Portugal after that. But I don't know, just kind of play it by ear. But yeah, it's probably Bermuda and then Azores and then Europe.
Very nice. And then you have plans for staying in Europe for a period of time?
Yeah, I got to figure out like all the logistics on that. It kind of depends where Corona's at and if I can get a vaccine and country borders and stuff. But yeah, I'll stay there for a while, and then I mean, you can't really plan too far in advance, right?
Well, isn't that true?
With this kind of stuff, because you never know what's going to happen, or if you'll still be into it. But I would like to, go through Europe and then kind of work my way kind of south a little bit, and then hook back across the Atlantic into the Caribbean, do the kind of trade wind route around the world. That's like kind of big picture maybe.
Yeah.
But who knows? Just one passage at a time.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Sam. So, if someone's listening to this podcast, what words of advice would you give them if they're sort of thinking about, sailing and doing some longer passages, or et cetera? What words of wisdom would you have?
Oh, I mean, like if you think you're gonna like it, then you should give it a try. You can get like some lessons, or you can just get a dinghy and kind of books and learn from yourself, or have it on a friend's boat. I think some people, it's definitely not for them, but they probably know it, right? So if you think you're interested in it, go for it.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. Hey, Sam, thank you very much for being on this podcast, on the Sailing the East podcast. And people can watch your videos, which are quite good. It's Sam Holmes Sailing on YouTube, and you have quite a few videos up there of your trip to Hawaii and your exploits in Hawaii and up the coast of the United States this year. I've watched a bunch of them. They're quite good. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode. We hope that you found it interesting and thought-provoking. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, please get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast@gmail.com. And please do subscribe if you haven't already. And better yet, tell a friend. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you soon.